Hi, my name is Jean-Baptiste. You can call me JB. I'm a second year medical student at Western Sydney University, and I'm here to talk about my rural experience.
So JB, where did you go?
So as part of the John Flynn Placement program, I was sent to the Northern Territory.
Great. And for those who don't know about the John Flynn Placement program, just in a few sentences, what is it?
Yeah, so I'd actually never heard of it until I went to the scholarship presentation run by Ruse. So that was actually, I'm glad I went. So the John Flynn Placement Program is an incredible program that's been running for quite a while. And they send 300 medical students around Australia to all states and territories for 8 weeks in total over the length of their degree. So you go 3 or 4 times, usually in the summer or in the winter break, whenever you can, and you complete. And it's actually a non-clinical placement, but you're still assigned to a clinic or to a GP or someone like that to supervise you. But I guess it's not like a placement where you have expectation of completing certain things. You just go and discover what rural medicine is about. And it's a fantastic opportunity. So I went for 3 weeks on my first placement.
Great. And what sort of things were you doing there?
So at Aningini, it's actually a massive Aboriginal medical service because it services the whole Barkly region, which is the size of a country elsewhere in the world. And so I was kind of rotating through because they're struggling for staff. So I wasn't assigned to a male GP the whole time because they didn't have one the entire time I was there. So I was assigned either to the remote area nurse that went out to communities. I was also the nurse that was there and doing consultation like a GP would in town, but because they're lacking GPs, the nurses do it. I also went with the child health nurse. I couldn't, unfortunately, go on any women consultation because of cultural differences there. And I also just followed the GP whenever he was there because he would go out to like aged care homes and other places outside of medical service.
Okay, and can you tell me a little bit about the visits to the communities? What sort of things were you doing in the communities?
So that was probably the highlight of the trip. So I went on 3 trips, and so the Aboriginal Medical Service had an agreement to service 4 different communities that were a few hundred kilometers out of town, so very remote. And so those are the places that you can't go unless, I guess, you're invited. And so I was very lucky to take part of it. So what they would do is they would go once a week or once a fortnight to those communities, and they would deliver medication. And they would also send a nurse and an Aboriginal health practitioner who both have the same scope, one male, one female. And so I just accompanied them. And so they would just provide just a visiting consultation room where they would be able to deal with any ad hoc problems and review any medication history and renew prescriptions with the agreement of the GP back in town. But because those people live so remotely and might not make it to town very often, it's fantastic service. And also we discovered the schools there. So one of the community had like a very small school with 12 students with one teacher. It was just, it was very different, very interesting things to see.
And how did that contrast to the things you saw when you were at the AMS clinic?
Yeah, so it was incredibly different because Tenant Creek, even though from Sydney, it's very small and remote. In terms of the Northern Territory, it's actually quite big. So you've got about 3,000 people there, plus a lot of transient people that temporarily live there or not. There's a lot of moving around in the Northern Territory. And so you've got, I guess, everything you need, like an IGA, which is a big thing. And, like the major shops, lots of pubs. I guess being a former mining town. And so, you still had that urban environment, whereas when you went to the communities, it was probably, 10, 15 houses that were, built in tin in a very, very remote areas. There wasn't roads there. So, we had to have the Land Cruiser and there wasn't any, running water. There wasn't any electricity. So it was just, they had solar panels and things like that. But it was just very, very remote as you can expect it to be. And so it just meant that, unfortunately, the health wasn't quite there. And there was a lot of chronic conditions because access to fresh, healthy food was very, very scarce and difficult. and also expensive. And I guess the access to bush tucker is becoming more difficult due to a variety of environmental, and cultural, and other reasons. So there's unfortunately a lot of health problems there, but the medical service is a big part in promoting. So they don't just do medical, they also do they've got a big public health sector that does a lot of outreach, a lot of education, and that was really interesting to see as well.
Great. And what sort of outreach things were going on at the time you were there?
Yep, so they had a big thing on healthy eating. So they would go out to schools and they would promote that. So they had a big board with all the healthy food and what replacements they could do. They also had a program through the IGA where you could buy a $10 pack. So it was a family meal thing where there was, you know, a pack of pasta, a tin of vegetables and a tin of tuna. And it was kind of like with a recipe. And it was just like, you could buy that and make that for your kids. And then they at the EMS, anyone that would come for the chronic care. So there was a lot of chronic kidney disease, a lot of diabetes. There was specialized educators, so special nurses that's in that area, and they would actually talk one-on-one with everyone. And I guess showed a lot of pictures, a lot of imaging, a lot of emphasis on bush tucker as well, because there's a big problem with anemia. So a lot of low iron, especially in children, and that can have developmental aspects, impacts on them. So there was also promoting, you know, things like kangaroo that are very rich in iron, are very good. So it was good to see that you could find a kangaroo tail at the IGA in the freezer section. So that was always that was unusual, but definitely good to see because I've had it once and it is quite nice.
Great. And where did you stay?
Yep. So so for John Flynn Placement program, traditionally you assign a community host, and you also assign a GP, and usually you stay at that community host or at the GP's place with their family and all of that. So it's a very nice environment, but unfortunately, due to the nature of health services in Northern Territory, you can't have that. So I was lucky that Flinders sends students, nursing students to Tenant Creek. So Flinders University has a house there. And so because it was summer break, I was able to stay in the house, which actually was a really nice house, like nicer than my house now. But it was probably one of the nicer houses in town, which kind of makes you feel bad. But at the time when it's 45 degrees every day, I was grateful to have air conditioning working. And yeah, so I did stay there, and there was a pharmacy intern there that worked at the pharmacy in town. She was from the Philippines, and that was just a good thing to have somebody else to bounce off, because that was probably one of the big things I found in those locations, is that I guess loneliness does happen. There's not much social interaction, so you kind of seek them out as much as you can. So I was glad to have somebody to stay with. Great.
And apart from feeling a little isolated, what other challenges did you come across in your placement?
So I guess culturally things are very different. So as I was saying, I couldn't sit on. So men and women actually had separate buildings, separate entrances where they would go into the Aboriginal medical service, and they would see male only or female only staff. I could sit on the children's consult because I was okay until puberty. So I guess that was kind of surprising, even though to everyone else it was normal. And I guess communication is also a big one. So a lot of people speak multiple languages because there's a lot of different cultures around. And so, you know, the assumption is we communicate in English, but it's not that logical to everyone else. So I guess communicating health terms, medication terms across with patients can be challenging. And I guess there was other things like a lot of restrictions were in place. So it was a bit surprising to see, like the restriction of alcohol was quite severe, and it was very expensive. Cigarettes were very expensive. A lot of things were done for public health reasons, which is great, but it was just a different world you step into. And then the remoteness as well. So if you couldn't find anything in Tenant Creek, you had to go to Alice Springs, which was a weekend away. And 2 people there, that's normal. A lot of staff did that. So they wanted to watch a movie at the cinemas. They would go and, you know, spend the night in Alice Springs over the weekend and come back and then talk about it at lunchtime on Monday. But I guess coming from obviously Sydney and other places, you could be surprised by those kind of things.
Terrific. And what were some of the highlights around Tenant Creek?
Yep.
Or in town?
So there's actually a bit to do. So that was really good. There's what's called Devil's Marbles, which are a huge rock formation, similar geologically to Uluru. So they're just giant rocks that are placed. And so that was really cool to visit. It's about 100 k's down the road. You know? And there's actually a really nice pub there called Devil's Marbles Hotel, with great food as well. So I'm not getting commission, but it was just it was just a really surprising thing from a roadhouse to get a great meal and I just have a good time. So it was good. And then there's a few other things. So there's an old telegraph station, which is where originally Tenant Creek was. So that's 6 kilometers out of town. It's an old mining town, so there's an old mining site, which now is shut down, so you can't visit it anymore, unfortunately. And then luckily when I was there, it was around Christmas time, so there was the big Christmas gift-giving celebration, so Santa came to town, so that was a big event, so I got to participate in that, so that was really fun. And there was also carols by candlelight, where a lot of the common songs, like Silent Night and others, were sung in local languages, and that was just really cool.
Fantastic. And for another student who's considering going to Tenant Creek, what advice would you give them to get ready, prepare mentally, practically, logistically, all those sorts of things?
Yeah. So logistically, I'd say you can actually, in Tenant Creek, you can find most things. So that was pretty good. But I would say, yeah, you'd want to be ready to see different cultures. So not assume because you're traveling domestically in Australia that things will be the same, because they're not. You've also got to be accepting of things that you can't change. So you definitely don't want to go there with the mindset that you're going to save people, because there's a lot more than meets the eye. So I guess it was the best example of the social determinants of health for me, where, as a doctor or a future doctor, you want to help somebody's health, but actually their housing situation, there might be 27 people living in a 2-bedroom house. So you can't change that. And that's what they need for it to change their health. And so I guess accepting that can be difficult. And also, so yeah, culture shock, I said, and then also just the remoteness. So the fact that you will be home, you might finish work at 4:30, you'll be home at 4:32, and there is not all that much to do except going to the RSL for a drink. So you just got to accept that life will be slower and different. But it was a fantastic experience, and I really enjoyed it. And it's somewhere, it's not for everyone, but I think you gain a lot out of it if you're open-minded and you go there wanting to be part of the community.
Great, thank you. And what are some of the main things you've taken away from that experience?
So I guess it was the best illustration of the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in terms of health outcomes and all of that we get taught a lot. We have a lot of lectures about it, but visualizing it can be challenging without actually seeing it. And that was probably the most, definitely. So it existed, and that's how things were, and that there's a lot that can be done, and there's a lot that we as future doctors can do by going to those places. I also was very grateful about everyone being so friendly and open. So I went there and I was, invited out. I got to know a lot of people because I guess there's a lot of people in the same situation working, I guess, temporarily in Tenant Creek. And so that was a fantastic community. And then I also benefited from, I guess it was kind of like a retreat as well. So it was kind of, because it was so peaceful and quiet, it was really nice to just, have some time off, especially after my exams and where I'd been nonstop for a few months. It was just relaxing. And also, I guess I did benefit from, on the way in, I traveled to Uluru and so a few touristy sites, which was kind of cool. So I enjoyed that.
Great. And how's that experience influenced what you're going to do next, whether it be in the John Flynn program or in your studies?
Yeah. So I've still got 2 more placements to go on my John Flynn Placement program. And so I hope to, I definitely will go back to Northern Territory, because as part of the program, you always go back to the same state. And generally you go back to the same place. But in the Northern Territory, things can be quite variable. So depending what time of the year I go, There might be cultural issues around certain places or things like that. So I might go to different places, for example, the community like I was meant to originally. And then as in my future, I've lived rurally most of my life. So I know I enjoy that kind of lifestyle. And I definitely saw a different aspect to practice medicine. So you're much more involved with each patient rather than transactional, because I guess you just have less patient, but at the same time, your patients have varied needs. And so you, as a practitioner, you're a lot, you feel, it's not you feel more important, but you feel more involved in their lives. And I think that was very beneficial, and I really enjoyed that from the general practice aspect. And so I really want to pursue a career in rural and remote areas. I found it fascinating, and I can't wait for my next placement.
Terrific. And any final words to students who are thinking about going rural?
Make sure that you have all the skills than medicine, because on one of the community, when we went out to community, we drove there, there was no one. We parked the Land Cruiser, walked around to see if there was anyone around, and everyone had gone out somewhere to probably out bush. And we'll go back to the Land Cruiser, and one of the tires flat. So you can't call the NRMA or anyone. And changing the tire of a Land Cruiser is very different to changing the tire of a city car. So that was definitely an experience, 45-degree heat as well. But luckily the remote area nurse probably knew what he was doing. So I just posed and looked good for the photos. That was about it. But yeah, any skill is welcome.
Terrific. Well, thanks very much for that, and good luck.
Thank you.